I presume the gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gaetz, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The American people are fatigued and frustrated by rising prices, by not being able to get the goods that they want or need. And we've had a Biden administration that has printed money like it's going out of style, that's declared a war on work with vaccine mandates by paying people to stay home, in some circumstances encouraging school closures or allowing them so that people are forced to stay home. They've backed lockdown strategies that have killed restaurants, causing more people to increase demands at grocery stores. And what you're being told by some in this hearing is that the reason that we are fatigued and frustrated at the grocery store is because of big food, not because of big government. And that's an assumption that I certainly think deserves challenging. I guess my first question is for Mr. St. Onge. Have the lockdown policy choices increased grocery demand in a way that might have spurred some of these challenges that consumers are facing?
Thank you for that question. I do want to take a moment to agree with the other witness, Mr. Mann, that antitrust often does raise prices. So I would second that opinion. Thank you for that question. Without a doubt, it did. Part of the impact was just the mix of products. People tend to buy higher priced cuts when they're cooking at home. A school cafeteria or restaurant might optimize with lower prices. And then part of it was also simply supply disruption. So there was a long period during the pandemic where there were too many cows, not enough beef. We also saw similar dynamics in lumber. So there have been disruptions really across the economy. And final point is that inflation itself tends to create a sort of illusion of profit. Many firms will book the goods they sell at the purchase price. Right now, you could argue they should book it at the replacement price, but at any rate, a certain amount of apparent profit during an inflation is an illusion. So, right, there are a number of factors either related to the lockdowns during the pandemic or to this inflation itself.
And in your research, have you looked at the extent to which the policy choices that have disincentivized work have impacted the supply chain and the amount of folks that are able to move product and onboard product and shelve product for our fellow Americans?
Absolutely. That's precisely what's been happening with the benefits, delinking benefits from work. That does not take dentists out of the business. It takes warehouse workers, retail workers, transportation workers out.
So the worst things that the Biden administration has done to the workforce are felt most in some of these areas that impact our food. Isn't that right?
That's exactly right.
Now, one of the policy recommendations that we've heard some of our colleagues reference in this hearing support moratoriums on mergers and acquisitions. But of course, we're the United States Congress. We only have jurisdiction over what happens in our country. If we were to do that, what impact would it have, if any, on global consolidation? Because I seem to see that particularly Chinese investors are consolidating globally. And if we were to deconstruct American companies, would that make us less competitive with the Chinese model?
Yes, that's a great point, and that would be the tendency.
And I have to say, there's a specific circumstance, Mr. Chairman, that deeply concerns me. So while we may not get bipartisan agreement for a total moratorium on mergers and acquisitions, the Smithfield Foods case study is one where I think we could get agreement. In that case, Smithfield Foods, Inc. sold to China. They sold to the WH Group of China. Now they're a wholly owned subsidiary. So the largest pork producer in the world, based in Virginia, that runs a lot of the pork brands that American consumers are familiar with, is Chinese. And I don't think that's good for our fellow Americans. I don't think that makes us more resilient. So maybe if we don't stop Americans from buying American companies, we could at least stop the Chinese from consolidating and improving their advantage over us. Mr. St. Onge, the regulatory environment has persistently put pressures on food prices. If the USDA allowed more direct consumer for smaller, more sustainable, more environmentally friendly farms, would that help people access more locally grown food at a lower price?
Yes, it absolutely would. That's one of the areas that the industry could really benefit from congressional action, is making it easier to enter the industry, particular for smaller businesses. We've got a couple witnesses here who represent that group. So without a doubt, whether it's making inspection regimes more logical, with more input, whether it's waters of there are a number of environmental rules that cause risks or costs for growers, and so absolutely being proactive in that area would help.
The
It would
time of the
seem-
gentleman has expired. The gentleman yields
yield
back.
back.
I recognize the distinguished gentleman from New York,